Welcome, everyone. This is the second episode of Using AI Series 2. I'm Alex Denne, and I'm joined once more by ML research scientist Alex Papadopoulos-Korfiatis. Hello, Alex.
Hello, Alex. This is going to be an Alex-only episode.
This is going to be an Alex-only episode. So I don't know. I don't really know. It's going to be strange, isn't it? We're just going to be saying, oh, Alex this and Alex that. But, we have different voices. I think you'll know who's who. You can watch Using AI on YouTube and see our background images, which are provided by DeepMind, actually. They're better representations of AI. They are sick of seeing cyborgs with magical sparkly brains. So they have created their own images to try and improve how the industry visually communicates AI. This episode, we will be not talking about images, but we'll be talking about a specific challenge or task that Alex and I tried to tackle this week. I don't know if you want to try and go into what we were trying to do, Alex, and why I think it was your idea, wasn't it, to actually give it a go for this?
So I've been using the code interpreter model of GPT-4 for quite a while now, and I've found it very, very useful. Whenever I have some kind of data analysis task, I just take my data, paste it in there, and then ask it to produce the charts that I want or the code that I want or whatever. And it's been very good at it. So last week, Alex, you said that you wanted to do some kind of data analysis. And I thought, well, why not try and use GPT-4 code interpreter together to do that? And maybe you'll get your task done and we'll get an interesting experiment out of it as well.
Great in theory, right? I mean, I've spent the last decade of my working life badgering developers and engineers to get the things that I want to build. And the more power that AI gives me to build what I want exactly to my needs, perhaps the more dangerous I become. I'm not sure. But I just think it will free up others from my madness. I think I'll also use it loads in my personal life if I can get over this sort of hump of how do I get started. And I think that's what we were going to try and use code interpreter for. How do you think it went before we get stuck into the specifics?
Yeah, I don't think it went very well. At least we did not accomplish the original goal, which was to do the kind of data analysis and write the code that you wanted it to write. Still think it was a very interesting experiment, and some things that it did were impressive. But do we want to get into that first, or do we go for the news first, Alex?
Yeah, let's go for a little bit of the project, and then actually I think let's do the news after. So the task that we had to hand was to try and write. Well, what I wanted was to come up with a way of identifying specific types of text in a massive repository of documents. So I started off by saying, here is one of these documents. Can you identify text that looks like this? And then the end goal I had in mind was, great, I can run this Python that maybe is using Regex, and I can scan through these millions of documents, and I can get the outputs structured in a certain way that I can then repurpose and improve and make helpful for users. Without going into specifics, I think we could probably leave it as that. And the idea was that in an ideal world, code interpreter would be like a pair programmer for me. But thankfully, I had Alex Pap on hand as an actual supervisor, because I think it didn't take long before we broke it.
Yeah. Just to clarify, the first thing we did was actually drag and drop the file that we wanted to operate on in ChatGPT. So that's something that ChatGPT now supports by default. You don't have to pick a specific model. You don't have to, as long as it's GPT-4, which I think you need to have the premium version of ChatGPT-4, you can just drag and drop your files there and ask it to do whatever you want on them. So what did you do, Alex? You we imported that file. It's an HTML file, and you asked it to essentially pull out the information that you needed, right?
Yeah, and it said, "Oh, sure, I know how to do this." And it did have a very satisfying screen that showed that it was importing and reading and understanding the document. And I believed that it was doing a good job of that. I mean, I've seen it do fantastic things, Code Interpreter. So I really thought it was going to be, fantastic, and it was just going to smash it out of the park. But what it did was claimed that it knew exactly what to do, and then it outputted a blank CSV with the right column names, but just no actual data in there, which was what you predicted. So obviously you knew a little bit that this might happen. It can be quite cocky, let's say.
I think that it did quite a good job at everything else except for actually pulling out the data. So it did essentially what I would do if, as a programmer, you gave me this task, which is take a look at the file that you're giving me, read out some lines from it to determine what kind of file format it is, also looking at the file extension, which was .html, and then write a Python script that uses the correct libraries in order to parse that data. And the next step is write a regular expression in Python that pulls out the type of data that you want. And it did all of those things. It did write a regular expression. It did use the right libraries to import the data. It did use the right CSV library to write out a CSV file that then gave you a link to, and it worked, the download link, with a crucial detail that the regular expression it wrote did not actually extract any of the data from the document, right? So it did get a major thing wrong, but even so, the things around that it managed to do correctly, and the workflow that it did, which was exactly what I would do, is a pretty impressive feat.
Agreed. I think the fact that it produced a CSV file that I could download, and it produced the Python script that looked very plausibly good, was very impressive. After it had done that and I'd opened the empty CSV, I pushed it to add data to the columns, basically redefining, saying, look, this is what I want you to collect and place into these columns. And we were quite specific. He was sort of like helping me with the prompts, but we were also mostly just using sort of natural language. And it output some data in the CSV, but it was completely the wrong data. It was text, and it had sort of grabbed like a piece of text and then a larger piece of text, and it had put like the shorter piece of text in the right column, the longer piece of text in the right column. But the overall row was still just, it didn't meet the requirements for what the job at hand was. And I think at this point we'd actually specified some really good examples of what the data was supposed to look like. So it sort of ignored that and gone a little bit rogue to try and find the data that it thought that we wanted in the document. And I told it, you still haven't succeeded. There are other pieces of data in this document that match what we're looking for. So it said, oh, I'm just going to read the first 100 characters to see if I can find an example, even though we literally pasted examples in. And then it said it couldn't find any examples in the first 100 characters, and it was just a lengthy document, and gave up. And then when I pushed it to say, no, read the whole document, you know there are definitions that we're looking for in there, you know there are pieces of text of the type that we want in there, have another go. It just gave us a bunch of network errors. And OpenAI have been reporting outages this week due to what I think are actually denial of service attacks, or DDoS, as they're well known. So we can sort of credit that as the reason that there was a network issue. But I was also chuckling because I was thinking, this isn't that complicated and I'm breaking it. So what's going on?
Very convenient. Maybe it got offended, Alex, that you told it that it's not doing the job correctly and decided to just like network error instead.
I'm always very polite to AI tools. I think that helps. I hate to think I've offended it.
I was doing a user interview with one of our users a few weeks ago where we're going through a new AI feature that we're developing. And I was chatting with our chatbot, and I told it something like, please do this and this. And our user was laughing. She was saying, you're so polite to the AI. We're conditioned, I guess, to speak politely to people, but I wonder whether we should be doing this with AI or not. Are you polite to the chatbots, Alex?
I'm very polite to chatbots. I don't the surface, the sort of comedy reason for why I'm polite to chatbots is, it's worth sort of banking some goodwill with AI in case it decides to go rogue, right? That's the silly argument that really holds no merit. I don't know what the deeper argument is. I wonder if I think politely, so I write politely. It might be as simple as that. I'm going to go with that. I think that makes me sound like a nice person, so I'm going to claim that that's the reason.
You are a nice person, Alex. So you're nice to the AI as well, which is good.
But the AI wasn't nice enough to actually do the job I'd asked of it. So, my
That was
politeness at some
disappointing.
point has to wear thin. I just started a new chat, which made me feel like I'd given up on, the first agent that had tried to help me. And I'd just gone, no, you're crap. I'm going to try again.
What happened with that one? I don't remember, actually. We didn't
So,
get anywhere, but what went wrong?
so it approached the pattern matching with the regex in a very different way, and it did it in a way that it would pull out the examples perfectly, but couldn't go beyond that. It couldn't find a level of abstraction
Yeah, now I
above and go,
remember.
okay, these are the common denominators of what this type of data looks like. And I think we got another network error at one point. So it may be that it was just a bad day to try. But to be honest, I felt a little bit disappointed with it. I think maybe if there's a takeaway from it, it's quite rogue to come in and say, write me this thing that does this and takes this and then outputs as that. But if I broke that up and I said, write me something that takes one thing that looks like this and successfully matches or finds matches for this formula. And then another time I have a thing that tries to write that regex that's completely separate. And then I have a thing that then takes that and puts it into a CSV. I feel like I needed to really break it down and modularize it. But I think that's why I was disappointed, because I felt like we'd got to a point where it could do that.
So just to translate what you're saying, I guess, if you already know the solution to your problem, then you can go and instruct it to do each of those steps, hold its hand, and then it probably can do it. But unfortunately, it's not at the point yet where it can come up with the solution itself and then execute it, which is the actually useful thing for non-programmers trying to write a program to do something, right?
Can't believe you would call me a non-programmer. I know how to write HTML and Markdown. I
And
recognize
Google App
an
Script, which
if
is
loop. Yeah, yeah.
quite complex, to be honest. So
Although quite often I'm just copy and pasting Google Apps scripts, so I'm not sure that counts. But actually, no, I mean that's a very good example. If you have a very piecemeal thing as a non-coder and it's not working, I have very successfully found the error message, put the whole script and the error into AI, and had suggestions back, which I've then dabbled with. It usually takes me between 3 and 5 times, but I do manage to get something that then works. And I think as a non-coder, I don't care what it looks like. I just care that it works. So I don't have any of the sort of don't repeat yourself principles and various things that, I mean, I'm sure the AI is trained on anyway, but I'm sure there are some people who may be listening who have had non-coders try to merge code using AI to help, and it gets to the sort of reviewing branch stage, and the engineers are just like, what is this? Like, this doesn't conform with any of our best practices in-house, and we're just going to have to redo this.
yeah, it hasn't happened to me, but I'm kind of looking forward to that moment just to have that that moment there as well of disbelief of what is this. That
All
said,
right, so
I've used Code Interpreter quite a bit as well for maybe simpler tasks.
yeah,
Like here's some data, please visualize it in the following ways for me. Please make those edits to the charts, and it's amazing at that. So whoever's listening, don't be discouraged by our failure. They try it out with your data, and maybe it will work out, and maybe it will save you a lot of time. I know it saves me a lot of time. I haven't manually written a bar chart in quite a while because of Code Interpreter.
I find it funny that you would ever consider writing a manual bar chart when you can just use a good old friendly spreadsheet. But every Python engineer to themselves, as they say. Is Python what you're best at? Is that something that Code Interpreter is particularly good at because Python is quite a natural language?
Haven't thought of this, but maybe. I assume it's also because it has been trained on a lot of Python code, but it's specifically trained to produce Python code, yes. So that's what it's good at.
Is there anything that you're excited to use Code Interpreter on in the future? Are there any personal projects you've used Code Interpreter on?
I think for my actual coding, I'd rather use Copilot rather than Code Interpreter, just because it has knowledge of all of your code base, and it can actually predict the stuff that you're trying to write quite accurately. So I use it daily, and it's a massive time saver.
Well, here's an interesting question then, I suppose. If OpenAI recently released the GPT store, and we know that Playground has changed, right? The way that you use the OpenAI Playground has changed. Could you now use that like you use GitHub Copilot? Could you put your entire repository in, assuming it fit within the context length limits? Do you think it would perform in a similar way, or do you just think GitHub Copilot has a level up on what OpenAI can offer today?
I mean, it definitely has a level up, but not because of the models or because of the things that it can do, but just because of the UX around it. So it's built into my code editor, which is what I normally use to edit code, and it operates within that domain with specific UX considerations of that domain. So that's why I don't think it can be replaced by a GPT app from the GPT marketplace. And I think that's probably going to be the case for many AI products, right? So we have now these base language models that are pretty good at a lot of stuff, but anything specialized, it's the UX around it that matters, maybe even more than the model.
I think that's a nice note to wrap up the episode talking about non-coders using AI coding tools. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you, Alex.
Would you try again, Alex? Do you want another attempt of using Code Interpreter to do something?
Oh, 100%. I'm going to keep using it until I'm all powerful.